Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. And if you missed Brian Daboll's first introductory press conference today, we got you covered with all the information. We're going to discuss multiple points of segments in this clip here in this video, ranging from Daniel Jones to the personality of Brian Daboll, what he's bringing to this team, and his interactions with players. You know, how does he like to create relationships with guys? That's another thing that really stood out to me. Just his ability to create kind of this family-centric attitude and mentality within an organization, I think is really special. And I definitely do want to talk about Daniel Jones. That was a big point of emphasis for a lot of reporters asking questions. And he had some interesting answers. He mostly brushed a lot of stuff aside. He had a very big little key hit on Patrick Graham. We're going to talk about that. But I'm excited to dive into Brian Daboll's first introductory press conference, Anthony. But before we get started, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, and I thought this was a really great introduction to Brian Daboll. I thought that he kind of, hit on every single point that we needed to hear. I thought the Patrick Graham news was super interesting, and I feel like Brian Daboll even made some hints as to where he's leaning towards going with the offensive coordinator position. And of course, I really like the things that he had to say about Daniel Jones. He touched on Saquon Barkley and a whole bunch of other things. And honestly, it wasn't that kind of captivating, give you all this big speech kind of thing that Joe Judge did, where he just said a lot of coaches speak and really convinced the fans to run through brick walls, even though it was all for naught. This was more like, this is an intelligent man who's speaking to us about football, and he sounds like he really knows what he's talking about in terms of football, schemes, all that kind of stuff that the Giants have really been lacking, And on top of that, he does sound like a very good, more familial head coach, right? Because Joe Judge was more dictator feeling, right? Like he wanted to tell you what to do and make sure that you do it right, even though he didn't make sure they did it right. But Brian Daboll seems more like that friendly guy that's going to get the most out of you because he has a really close relationship with you. And I do think that's what the Giants have been missing, and it's what they really need here. And I really love that already the synergy is there. Him and Joe Shane are together in lockstep in unison. I think it's really exciting stuff. So great introductory press conference, and I'm excited to discuss it.
Yeah, and like you said, he gets the most out of players by creating relationships and bonds with them that go more beyond football, right? Joe Judge kind of had this Bill Belichickian, Nick Saban-esque approach with his disciplinary ways. And there's reports coming out now, Lawrence Tynes and a couple other people are saying that players actually were really, really over it. They were not happy about the intensity of the practices, the intensity of the workouts. And at the end of the day, a lot of guys ended up getting injured. And maybe that's a cause, we don't know. But they definitely were upset about it. And, there's stuff coming out now, about his tenure here. So Brian Daboll's a little bit different, right? He said during his introductory press conference that he'll just FaceTime guys. He'll have guys over to dinner with his wife. He has 6 kids. They were all there. Good looking family. So it's interesting to see, how the Giants are going to be kind of changing course here entirely in terms of mentality. They went to, they're coming from this authoritarian dictator kind of style to a more family-oriented thing. And the word I used to describe Brian Daboll in the last video was modernized, right? But there's another word I want to throw out there, and it's genuine. He was genuine in his press conference. He came across as just another guy. He was cracking jokes. He was making fun of reporters for walking in late. He was making fun of reporters for asking weird questions. Like, he was just cracking jokes and having fun. Like, it seemed like a more friendly kind of, I guess, place in general, but that's not exactly what the Giants have been the last 20, 30 years or so. Tom Coughlin sure as hell wasn't like that. Joe Judge sure as hell wasn't like that. Pat Shurmur, I don't even know what he was. Ben McAdoo, he was more worried about putting grease in his hair than running the team. So I think, ultimately when you're looking at Brian Daboll, it's totally different, but he's committed. He's a football guy. He wants to win. There was one reporter that asked him, look at the Cincinnati Bengals. They won 4 games last year. Now they're in the Super Bowl. And he's like, I'm just trying to hire a staff. Like, I'm not even thinking about winning the Super Bowl next year. We don't have Joey Burrow. That's a totally different mentality, totally different thing. Daniel Jones is not Joe Burrow. Daniel Jones is not Josh Allen. But he did have some interesting things to say about Daniel Jones, and I'll start it off with that, Anthony, and we'll dive right into that. So right off the bat, everyone's like, Daniel Jones, is he your guy? What do you see in him? Do you think he's a long-term solution here? And John Mara said after the press conference, in fact, that every head coach candidate and every general manager candidate viewed Daniel Jones as a guy they could build around, which I found to be very interesting because he's going into his 4th year. They have to make a decision on his 5th year option by May. There's a lot of different things they have to figure out before then. So this is what Brian Daboll said about him. First and foremost, there's a couple other things we will get to later on. He said he's got the right mindset. He's got good size. There's a lot of things to like about Daniel, and we'll just take it one day at a time. We'll work with him. We'll get him better. We'll help him be a better leader. We'll help him be everything. That's our job as a coaching staff and as an organization. It takes everybody. It's not just me. It's the rest of the coaches on our staff. It's the scouts. It's the support staff. It's the ownership group. It takes a lot to raise a quarterback, if you will. And he's been around the block here these past 3 years with some different pieces. We're going to try and give him some stability and just take it from there. I thought that was a great way to kind of introduce his opinion of Daniel Jones. Just support the guy. One of the first things he did with Daniel, he went up to Daniel and said, hey, man, over the last 3 years, what are the things that you love the most? What is the scheme? What is the system? What did you enjoy the most? And if you're a good coach, you go to your players and say, what are your strengths? Let's build a scheme to support your strengths. Let's not force you into this BS scheme that Norv Turner was running in 2004 and Jason Garrett tried to resurrect last season. Let's actually build a system around you that you can succeed in and capitalize off of. What do you like to run? I think that was a tremendous first impression for Daboll on Daniel Jones, Anthony. How are you viewing that initial impression, and do you think that is a positive thing?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a positive thing. My favorite part that you mentioned right there is, Brian Daboll asking Daniel Jones to point out the plays and concepts that he's liked during his first 3 years, and even all the way back at Duke in college. He's asking Daniel Jones, what are your favorite concepts? What routes do you like to throw to the most? What play designs do you like the best? How can we get you to succeed? That's the main thing. Brian Daboll is trying to build the offensive scheme. He's not taking what he did with Josh Allen, bringing it over here and expecting Daniel Jones to just immediately have success with it. He's trying to take what Daniel Jones really likes, combine it with what helped make Josh Allen successful in Buffalo, put those two things together, and build a scheme that can maximize the talent of Daniel Jones and the players around him. I think that's really, really great. He's trying to extract all of the potential out of these players, and he's going to do that with a collaborative approach. Now, I don't really know, we don't know what Jason Garrett was like behind the scenes, right? We don't know if he was asking Daniel Jones to pick plays from Duke. Personally, I don't think he was, because I watched that Duke offense because I scouted. I actually watched every single play of Daniel Jones's collegiate career prior to that NFL draft. I did that for Haskins as well. I really went in on that draft. And let me tell you, the Duke offense back then, well, not even close to what Jason Garrett was doing with the Giants. I mean, there were not nearly enough RPOs to make it a fair comparison. Duke loved to run a lot of wide receiver screens. You barely ever saw that with the Giants. And Daniel Jones, I think, was very comfortable throwing those screens, running an RPO-heavy offense under Dave Cutcliffe. So, you take a look at what Jason Garrett was doing. It was so different from what Daniel Jones was comfortable with and what made him successful at Duke. But now you got Brian Daboll coming in here. He's probably going to say, hey, do you like to throw wide receiver screens? Do you like more RPO action? Do you like play action? Do you like to just stand in the shotgun, kind of run the game that way? How do you like this offense to be ran? Like, what do you want to do with it, Daniel Jones? And I think that's super important, just to have that collaborative aspect and that synergy between not only the GM and head coach, as we kept talking about, but with the head coach and the quarterback, having synergy right there, where it's not just the head coach handing over this scheme to the offensive coordinator, handing over that scheme to the quarterback and saying, this is what you're going to run, have fun, good luck. It's more like, hey, let's sit down, let's build this scheme together, let's make sure that we're maximizing your talents and building this offense just how you like it, just how the quarterback likes it. Because at the end of the day, if the quarterback is not comfortable in the scheme is never going to work. So I thought that was really important. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, isn't this just kind of common sense? Isn't this what every coach should do? I mean, probably, and that's what the best coaches do. You know that Sean McVay definitely sat down with Matt Stafford, took some schemes that he liked from Detroit, threw it into this playbook, and then combined it with what he already had. You know that Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor definitely sat down and built the offensive scheme together. But when you look at other teams, right, you look at the Jaguars under Urban Meyer and their offensive coordinator, did that look anything like the Clemson offense? No, not at all. That was a completely different scheme. Jason Garrett and Daniel Jones, did that look anything like what Daniel Jones ran in his rookie season with Pat Shermer? Not at all. So it might be common sense for most people, but it doesn't seem like it's looked at as common sense amongst all the offensive coordinators in the league. So I do think it's important to hear Brian Daboll start it off in his introductory press conference and make it clear that he is collaborating with the quarterback to build the best scheme possible.
Exactly. And my favorite quote of the entire press conference is very simple. Schemes are going to be what the players are best at. That should go in the Hall of Fame of quotes for Giants coaches. But I'll tell you what, it's easy to say it, right? It's easy to say it. Let's go watch him do it. Go and do it. Don't say it. Go do it. We're tired of the coach speak. We want to see it happen. Now, what we saw with the Buffalo Bills and Brian Daboll, and a lot of people hit on this, his scheme got progressively better as things got more comfortable with Josh Allen and he understood his players better and whatnot. But we've really hit on Anthony the last couple of years. The mismanagement of Saquon Barkley, the fact that they were not using Kadarius Toney properly at times last year, the fact that they would run Daniel Jones on these awesome zone reads, and then they wouldn't do it the next game. You know what I mean? Like they just weren't consistent and they weren't using what worked. A lot of times when coaches aren't, I guess the scheme isn't doing well, the scheme is struggling, it's because they don't know what their players' strengths really are. They're trying to force the players to adapt to what they like and not the other way around. Brian Daboll's going into this saying, we're going to build a system, we're going to build a scheme. And I'm not saying Josh Allen and Daniel Jones are even close to the same quarterback, but they are both athletically gifted with both their arm and their legs, right? They both can throw the ball well. Josh Allen's a far better passer, far better arm strength, but Daniel Jones has a decent arm, so we can work off of that. Daniel Jones can run fast. He's not a bulldozing quarterback. He's not going to turn on a dime like Josh Allen can. He doesn't have that big body, that big frame with just insane athleticism. He has amazing straight line speed. How can we get Daniel Jones into opportunities where he can run in a straight line without getting hit behind the line of scrimmage, right? The zone read, RPO, there's different things you can do to get him in a straight line. That's how I see them activating Daniel Jones as a runner, because ultimately when you have a mobile quarterback like him, you have to utilize that factor at some point. You have to figure out ways to maximize it. You can't always have him throwing the football. Good quarterbacks in the league these days, unless you're Burrow or you're Mahomes. Even Mahomes runs the football quite well, if you saw him the other day. So, when you're looking at Daniel Jones, I think Brian Daboll has the right mentality and the right attitude towards making him a better quarterback. Will he be amazing? Who knows? Will he be elite? Probably not. Will he be the quarterback of the future? There's no way of telling. You know what I mean? We'll see what happens this year, and then we'll evaluate. I don't think they'll pick up. I mean, honestly, I'm actually at a crossroads here. I don't know if they'll pick up his fifth-year option or not. The way that they're speaking about him maybe indicates they will, but at the same time, you could decline it and franchise tag him for a similar amount, so I don't really see much of a difference there. So maybe they'll just let it go. Anthony, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'll also say Joe Shane did mention today that he's going to have to clear around $40 million in cap space this offseason. That's what he said. He said, I want to clear $40 million. Now, if he's trying to be very careful with the money, trying to clear all this money this offseason, I don't believe he's just going to pick up this fifth-year option on an unproven quarterback still on his rookie deal. I have a feeling that he's probably going to let him play this year under Brian Daboll before he makes a decision going into the following season. So, I don't know. It just sounds like he's being very careful with the money, thinking long-term, trying to clear up some money and get this team back in a healthy cap situation. So I just don't envision Joe Shane going ahead and saying, yeah, let's pick up this fifth-year option before we ever see him play a snap in Brian Daboll's offensive scheme.
Right, and that's totally reasonable, especially with the cap situation the Giants are dealing with. If we talked about a couple players yesterday that they could move on from. Sterling Shepard's one of them. Blake Martinez could be a restructure candidate. James Bradbury's another guy. Kyle Rudolph, Riley Dixon, both definitely gone. There's a lot of guys that are on the wire here. So we also, I mentioned Saquon Barkley and the fact that they've just been running him down the middle over and over and over again. Use him like Deebo Samuel. He's that athletic. Like, get him outside on those sweeps. Get him in the outside zone. Have your freaking left tackle power blocking for him. Like, do whatever you got to do. So whatever it takes to get your best players the ball and maximize their talents, that is what I think Brian Daboll will try to do, and being creative with it. So it's going to take time, though. You know what I mean, Anthony? Like, it's going to take time to incorporate the new analytics. It's going to take time to build a new scheme. I mean, Brian Daboll's coming over with a ton of. He has probably a playbook the size of a freaking dictionary of plays. You know what I mean? He has experience as OC with multiple teams like Cleveland, obviously Buffalo. There's many others. He was, coaching with New England. He has plays from across the entire league. And now is his opportunity to put it all together and build a system for Daniel Jones. He built a really great one for Josh Allen. And there's reports that he's also going to get Ken Dorsey to be his offensive coordinator. Now, Joe Shane indicated that, hey, we don't want our head coach to be calling plays. We want him to be managing the game. We don't want him to be calling plays. Ken Dorsey would be the perfect guy to call plays because he's lockstep in line with Brian Daboll. But Brian Daboll also said, I'm pretty sure there's two head coaches in the NFL in the Super Bowl right now that are actually calling plays. So that's something to keep in mind. You can do it. the guys are a little bit more experienced than Brian Daboll. I'd say maybe if he wants to take on calling plays later on, let him do it. But for now, Ken Dorsey seems like a pretty good option because of the just the alignment. And they both really, really harped on alignment between the GM, the coaching staff, the head coach. If you're not in line, that's when things get crazy. That's what Daboll said. So, Anthony, when you're looking at alignment, how important do you think it is that Ken Dorsey ends up being this offensive coordinator? Because I think that would make their job a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think it's super, super important. I'll even bring this up. I was scrolling through Twitter and just saw this. This is from GT Bobby Thompson of Fansided. He was way ahead on the Brian Daboll to New York Giants news, right? Like he had all of the insider reports on that. And he just tweeted out that the Bills could still promote Ken Dorsey, and they don't have to go through too many interview processes to do that. But the Giants have already offered Ken Dorsey a lucrative deal to be the team's offensive coordinator. Now, of course, that's not confirmed, but if that's true, that's huge. That's really big news. That's important for the Giants because that says a lot about what Brian Daboll is trying to build over here in New York. Because, if he's already getting on the phone with Ken Dorsey and offering him a big contract, that means that, especially after Brian Daboll explaining today that he doesn't necessarily want to call plays, he wants the OC to do that, but if he has to call plays, he will. So it sounds to me like they're offering a lot of money to Ken Dorsey so that Ken Dorsey can call plays because they want Ken Dorsey to call plays. But if they don't get Ken Dorsey, then Brian Daboll might just have to call the plays himself because you don't want to really bring in like a brand new offensive coordinator that doesn't exactly know the offensive scheme in year one and kind of muddy things up. In that case, Brian Daboll probably calls the plays and keeps the offense, synergetic, keeps it on lockstep. But if Ken Dorsey steps in, already knows the majority of the playbook, already has a working relationship with Brian Daboll, then he can just step in as the OC, call the plays, and do a phenomenal job in that regard. So I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, and almost praying to the football gods right now that the Giants do land Ken Dorsey because it sounds like it's something that's super, super important to Brian Daboll. And if he thinks it's that important to his success, then the Giants have to figure out a way to get that done. Get Ken Dorsey in the OC position, let him call the plays, and let him help develop Daniel Jones and the rest of these offensive players. I think that's really, really important for the Giants. I think it's probably the number one thing that they're placing emphasis on right now while they're building Brian Daboll's coaching staff. All the other assistant coaches they'll worry about later, but it sounds like they're hyper-focused on making Ken Dorsey the offensive coordinator for the 2022 season.
And then that would be absolutely phenomenal, right? I've had multiple arguments with people on Twitter whether Ken Dorsey or Brian Daboll have been most impactful in Josh Allen's development. And hell, we both could be right. So now you get both of them, and they have him come in here and helping Daniel Jones. It seems like it's a win-win situation. Obviously, like you mentioned, him calling plays would really take a lot of stress off of Brian Daboll because he knows he can trust Ken Dorsey, and they would be working lockstep and in unison to develop this scheme. So, and they already have a system. They already have a scheme and a system. They could really just adapt it to what Daniel Jones needs. So I think that would be a really, really great thing for the Giants. As a couple people have been saying on Twitter and social media, it seems like he's pretty much locked in. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what this team can accomplish with these new guys in place. And looking at a couple other factors here, the first thing that Brian Daboll was asked was, is Patrick Graham going to be your defensive coordinator next year? And he said, are the rumors true? And he said, yep, they're true. If he doesn't get the job in Minnesota, we plan to retain him as our defensive coordinator. Now, personally, I think that's a good thing, and I'll tell you why. And I'd love to hear your opinion. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear your perspective in the YouTube comments as always. Definitely respect your opinion nonetheless, even if you don't agree with me. So the reason I like Patrick Graham, 2020, the Giants had a top 10 defense, right? They relied on this bend, don't break defense. The offense was actually better somehow, and we thought it couldn't get any worse. And they had a top 10 defense despite all of that. The Giants lost a couple games, Tampa Bay, a couple games by 1-2 points, and they could have been in the playoff situation. The Evan Ingram drop against Philadelphia. And for all those people that don't know this, Evan Ingram is a free agent. He probably will not be back with the team. I see a lot of people saying we should release Evan Ingram, we should cut him. I'm like, he's not going to be here. He's a free agent, so keep that in mind. There's a lot of players that will be gone, and it's going to be a lot of roster turnover. But Patrick Graham built a top 10 defense in one offseason for this team. One offseason. Now they took a big step backward this past year, and I would like to point out a couple of reasons why. First of all, Blake Martinez's ACL tear was a big, big deal. Second of all, they lost Kyler Fackrell, they lost Marcus Golden, they lost a couple of guys that really impacted their ability to pass rush. They were relying on Lorenzo Carter coming off an Achilles tear, and they were relying on a rookie in Azeez Ojulari. So that's tough to come by right off the bat. Lorenzo Carter ended up having a pretty solid year. I'd actually be fine retaining him, and I'm sure he would be dirt cheap at the same time. So, when I'm looking at Patrick Graham, though, specifically, he tried to get more aggressive when the season started. We saw a lot more cover one, a lot more blitzing. But the problem was James Bradbury is not a man coverage corner. He was getting toasted in man coverage. He's not fast enough. He's a zone coverage corner. He plays really well cover two and cover three. That is what he really thrives in these Tampa 2s and whatnot. Blake Martinez was essential in those Tampa 2 defenses. Tate Crowder does not have the pass coverage IQ to actually manage that. I actually think they should retain Jalen Smith. He's going to be dirt cheap, and he looks pretty good at the end of the year there. He can be serviceable and compete. But the Giants had the 23rd ranked defense in points allowed per game this year. They were not good by any means, but let's also take a look at the offense. The offense was abysmal. They put him in poor field positioning. They forced the defense to be on the field for pretty much the entire game. The possession differences were absurd. The defense was put in a position where injuries were going to mount because they were just put in such a bad spot to begin with. So I don't necessarily blame Patrick Graham for all of these things, Anthony. I think that he could actually be a perfect guy to come in here or be retained essentially and smooth over the defense. Let him maintain the defense and let Brian Daboll fix the offense. If you have to go and overhaul the defense, Brian Daboll's attention gets pulled in many different directions. Retaining Patrick Graham really gives you the continuity to go after the offense and solve that thing. I think this is a great strategy. Personally, I think it's a great strategy for that reason. You don't have to overturn the whole defense. Let Patrick Graham do his thing. The players know him. The players love him. They respect him. He can maintain a lot of what's already been happening, and I think that they can be a great group under his leadership. And with that being said, we're going to see a lot more effort going into the offense and bolstering it and evaluating draft talent and stuff like that. So, and free agents. So, Anthony, I don't know if that justification, that argument makes a lot of sense to you, but I feel as though, to me, it's only a win-win.
No, yeah, it makes complete and perfect sense to me, and I actually agree with pretty much everything you just said. I mean, with Patrick Graham, he's a brilliant man. Like, he's a genius. He's an Ivy leaguer. He's really smart, and he's going to be a head coach one day. Like, he is that talented. He's that smart. He's one of the brightest defensive minds in football. You want to keep that guy on staff if you can. Now, of course, the Vikings might really like him, might go ahead and hire him, and then that would suck. Giants have to go find a new DC, and they have to really rework the entire coaching staff. But with Patrick Graham already being there, another thing too, that it gives them more money in the budget to spend on the offensive coordinator, because they're already paying Patrick Graham a pretty significant wage because they hired him to be the assistant head coach with Joe Judge. So he's already making more than most defensive coordinators in the NFL. So what does that do? You don't have to pay Patrick Graham while you let him go if you fire him, and then also pay a new DC. You're just continuing to pay Patrick Graham the wage that you were paying him, and now you get a little added pocket change to put into Ken Dorsey with this lucrative deal at offensive coordinator, so you can go out there and build exactly the staff that you want and keep it under the proper budget. So I think that's a really important thing that you might not have mentioned, that someone mentioned to me on Twitter. I thought that was really interesting. The Giants now have more money to spend on Ken Dorsey if they do in fact continue with Patrick Graham as defensive coordinator. So I think that's important, but also the continuity that you just mentioned, Alex. I think that's huge. Guys like Xavier McKinney, think about that. Xavier McKinney, Azeez Ojulari, these are our young, talented defenders that we want to develop. We talk a lot about how Daniel Jones had an offensive coordinator in his first season, then switched to a new offensive coordinator, and how that stunted his growth, how they screwed him up by doing that. Do we want to do that with Xavier McKinney? Do we want to do that with Azeez Ojulari? Do we really want to tear up the entire defensive coaching staff just so we could say that we rebooted? No, I don't think we need to reboot fully, because the defense was good, and there are players on there on that defense that Patrick Graham was absolutely getting the most out of, that he was absolutely developing to become the best players that he could have been. So I think Xavier McKinney is a phenomenal example. I think Julian Love is a prime example, because that was a fourth-round pick. Azeez Ojulari, I mentioned him, and I was going to mention him again, but Julian Love, think about him. He was a fourth-round pick. He was okay. Then Patrick Graham steps in and just makes him like great. Like, he's one of the best backup defensive backs in the NFL. He's a starter, but he plays backup for the Giants, and he really does so much in that defense. Patrick Graham knows exactly what roles to place him in and how to get the most out of him in every role. So I think he's a prime example of Patrick Graham's brilliance on defense. And I think, especially you mentioned it. Leonard Williams, for sure. Leonard Williams moves all across the defensive line. I've seen Leonard Williams even stand in a two-point stance on the edge and get some sacks. He does it all. He's had his best years of his career under Patrick Graham. Patrick Graham is a brilliant defensive mind. That's basically the point that I'm trying to get across. And the Giants are wise to keep him in place. Keep that continuity for the defense. They are definitely tearing up everything that had to do with the offense. They're going to redo the offense completely, so you might as well just keep the defense right and focus solely on fixing that offense, because that is by far the biggest need for the Giants. You have to fix this offense. And now if you think that the defense is good enough for at least for another season or two, then they should keep it in place, because I think that Patrick Graham really is a smart guy who knows what he's doing. So I would love it if the coaching staff looked like head coach Brian Daboll, defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, and then they go all in and get Ken Dorsey as OC. I think that would be perfect, a dream scenario for the Giants, for Giants fans even, for the Giants players. That's exactly what I hope to see happen this offseason for Brian Daboll and his coaching staff.
Absolutely. And I'll leave you guys with this before we wrap up here. Maris said that Daboll is very genuine and down to earth. He's also inspiring. Asked if he's too nice. Some people have mentioned that in recent days, that maybe he's too nice. Maris said Daboll is tough when he needs to be. He learned that by doing his research on him. So if you're saying, oh, the Giants don't need this hugging head coach who cares about his players, that's bullshit. And I'll call you out on it, because Daboll, you don't develop an elite quarterback in the NFL like Josh Allen without being tough, without being disciplined. It just does not happen. You know what I mean? It just is. It's not possible. So I think that he is able to be disciplined when it needs to be. When you have an offense that just ranked third in the NFL, they were the highest scoring offense in the postseason before they got knocked down the Buffalo Bills. You have a 4th round 2020 draft pick getting 4 touchdowns in one game. That does not come without discipline and passion and care. Okay, that does not happen like that. So if you think that Daboll is not a tough guy, is not going to discipline this team when it needs to happen, I think you're mistaken. I think that he's going to be just fine. But again, it's about what happens on the field and not what happens behind the scenes. The NFL is a results-based business. We need to see progress. This upcoming season, off season rather, I expect to see a lot of turnover on the roster. I expect to see them cutting and releasing a lot of players. They're going to have to create at least $40 million in cap space, Joe Shane said. So expect a lot of guys to be released. If you want to take a look at some of the money things that will be incoming, watch our video on Sunday that we dropped. It'll tell you all about the players that we think could be released. We'll see if they look to trade. Maybe they'll try and trade Saquon Barkley. I heard some Buffalo Bills fans actually want Saquon Barkley. Maybe they want to trade him for us. So we'll see what happens there, guys. But there's a lot left to unfold. We'll have you guys updated on any information. Ken Dorsey at offensive coordinator, hopefully, that'll happen tomorrow, maybe. And there's a lot of stuff coming out about it. And we'll get you guys all the information you need, so that way you're well prepared to go into this offseason, and we'll start taking a look at some cool prospects and players in the Senior Bowls this week. So it'll be really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. As always, I'll also check out the description for our DraftKings promo code. Bet $5 and win $280 to spend for free. 56 to 1 odds. It's phenomenal. Easy money there. Make sure to take advantage of that promo code. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants video.
TVSO.